Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We get 12:01. I'm going to give folks a few more minutes here to trickle in. I will cut my comments short. It won't make Michelle and Tom. They're far more valuable to me. But we'll give people another minute or two here for me. We'll see a couple folks trickling in. Amber, if you want to give me a thumbs up or some reaction on your screen, if you think we're ready to go. Okay. I'll give it one more minute here and then we'll go. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. First up, I'm Tom Brook. I'm the president and CEO of Denver South, and I want to thank you all for joining us here today. I realize you've all got busy schedules, so thank you for joining us and taking time out of your day to spend some time with us. The purpose of Nexus and the program we've got here for the entrepreneurs is really to raise awareness for the resources and the partners that are available for startup communities and or startup companies and entrepreneurs in the Denver South region. When I joined Denver South as CEO back in 2019, I had just spent about 15 years working in the entrepreneurial space, working with dozens of companies. And through that time, I came to recognize the value of community, of connections, and of collaboration. And as Eric Byington, who recently left to his own entrepreneurial venture with his brother, of all people, Jake Grishavi, who also left to become the economic development director for Chaffee County, and I were discussing this, we recognize the opportunity and maybe even the obligation to do something here in Denver South to help foster that community. And that's what really gave rise to Nexus here. As we look at the community, we recognize we've got tremendous entrepreneurial talent, tremendous potential entrepreneurial talent with all the engineering talent and other high quality and highly educated workforce we have down here. We also have a lot of resources in the area to help assist those entrepreneurs as they embark on their journey. Being an entrepreneur is a challenging journey, as any of you who have done it know, and it's one that we rarely go alone. We need to have resources there. So our goal here was to help convene these people, the entrepreneurs, the resources, to bring them together, to connect them where it made sense. Be that connection an office, a lab space, a connection to a larger company or a jurisdiction here in our area, a mentor, some help with fundraising or legal work or accounting, or sometimes just another person who's been through that journey, who has the ability to sit down and empathize with me as how I'm going to make payroll on Friday when I don't have cash in bank. So those are the pieces, those are the connections we're attempting to foster here with Project Nexus. So as you embark on these programs and as you are out in your daily lives, please think of us. If we can help in any way, make a connection, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. One other plug I'll put in here is our upcoming October 27th Nexus Forum over at VentureX, the co-working space. Please join us there, and you'll hear from Lee Fatzinger, the CEO of Turbine Labs, as he discusses his entrepreneurial journey. Fascinating, folks. On this call, I want to start with introductions here. We are joined for this event by RIoT, and we're privileged to have their executive director, Tom Snyder, with us here today. Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us, Tom. RIoT is a 12-week high-touch accelerator program that increases the impact of traditional business development resources by connecting startups with an industry consortium of more than 90 companies across the IoT technology stack to learn, partner, and bring products to market. We've been really blessed to work with Tom and his team over the last 6 to 8 months here. And it's been a great partnership as they help to bring different perspectives to the Colorado ecosystem, coming out of North Carolina and some of the great success they've had there, both with their entrepreneurial ecosystem, but also with the local jurisdictions. And we think here in Denver South, we've got a similarly situated group of jurisdictions that are very open to assisting in this entrepreneurial journey and open to advancing some of these entrepreneurial IoT type devices and technologies. Tom, did you want to share a few words before we started, and then I'll jump to Michelle's introduction and get moving?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, Tom, and thanks for everyone for joining today. As Tom mentioned, I'm Tom Snyder. I lead the RIoT organization. We've been focused on job creation, and we think that the best place to create jobs is in the space of emerging technology. So we're excited to have built quite a base in the Eastern United States. I'm sitting in Raleigh, North Carolina right now as we talk today. We've worked with hundreds of companies that have raised more than $400 million now and created nearly 1,000 jobs. And we were excited not only through the corporate partners we have, the 90+ companies that Tom mentioned, but other relationships saying, hey, what you've done in the Eastern US, we'd love to see a hub form in the West. And we think Colorado is the right place to do that. And so we've been spending the last year or so expanding, beginning to run programs in the area. And we couldn't be more excited about the relationship with Denver South and others that we've met, as well as Project Nexus. I mean, the goals in helping to create those interconnections and that kind of that teamwork and collaborative approach to entrepreneurial development and ecosystem development, fits really, really well with RIoT does. And so we're happy to be here. We're happy to talk offline with anyone who would like to understand how to get involved. But one thing that everybody on the line today can do that is a huge help, bigger than you can think, is just all of us know someone who's maybe thinking about starting a business. Just figure out, how do you introduce them to someone else? How do you maybe point them to the resources that Michelle's going to talk about for folks who may not be on the line? And so, please get engaged.
Great advice, Tom. I think you're right. I think you're spot on. That's one of our reasons for starting Nexus, is we believe the entrepreneurial ecosystem is where the most significant amount of jobs are created, particularly going to be here in Colorado. We've got, again, tremendous resources, tremendous talent, and we think there's tremendous opportunity for creating those entrepreneurial jobs here in Denver South. With that, I want to introduce Michelle Hadwiger. Michelle is the Deputy Director of the State Office of Economic Development and International Trade. Michelle has an extensive background in economic development, starting her career right here at Denver South, prior to moving on to the city of Lakewood and ultimately to the state. This unique experience across the local, regional, and state economic development landscape gives Michelle, again, a very unique perspective in helping her to collaborate and align the interests across these disparate parties and different stakeholders. At OEDIT, Michelle leads a team of 11 professionals, she's directing and overseeing Colorado's global business development strategy. Included in Michelle's portfolio is the Advanced Industry Program. In 2020 alone, this Advanced Industry Program provided access to capital to over 59 companies, 41 proof of concept projects, and granted over $20 million in program funding. I'm sure we'll hear a little bit more about that later. Michelle, we are grateful for you taking time out of your busy schedule. I know the governor and Pat and others, I'm sure, keep you more than busy, and you just got back from a recruiting trip from Europe. So thank you for taking time out and spending some time with us. Take it away.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Tom and Denver South, as well as the RIoT team for having the state on the call. We do appreciate the partnership that we've built with our local communities, and appreciate the introduction. Also, just by way of background, for those of you who I haven't had the pleasure of working with, I did work under the Hickenlooper administration for 2 terms and have now transferred into the Polis administration. And under the Hickenlooper administration, I had the pleasure of not only running the business development team and efforts, but also as the executive director of the Colorado Innovation Network. So I have some experience in the innovation, entrepreneurial, ecosystem development space as well. With that, I'll get started in talking just more about the demographics and dynamics of what the Colorado's business community looks like, primarily from the small business side to the capital stack, access to capital programming, and what resources might be relevant to participants in the innovation and entrepreneurial space. So next slide, Chris. I'll give you a little bit of a background on, Colorado's small business economy. Our state really is powered by small businesses, and of over the 710,000 businesses in the state of Colorado, 535,000 of those are non-employer businesses, such as real estate agents and general contractors. and 174,000 of those employ workers. 76% of those who employ workers, or 132,000, employ less than 10 workers. As a breakdown shows, the primary sectors in which these employers work are within professional technical services, construction, retail trade, healthcare, and others. With that, Colorado's average business creation has outpaced the nation. We're at 3.5 to 4% each quarter since about 2016 consistently, ranking Colorado in the top 10 states, whereas the US creation for business has been just about 3% over that same period. So small business concentration really is a big part of Colorado's economy and creates the dynamism and innovation that our state needs to fuel our larger ecosystem as well. Next slide. Here's what that ecosystem is fueled on. Is many of these companies in Colorado are part of a dynamic and rapidly growing startup ecosystem. The communities that have ranked consistently in top 5 in terms of startup density are Denver, Boulder, Colorado Springs, and Fort Collins. And that is partly contributed to the collaborative nature of working with our local partners, as well as a number of accelerators, incubators, and research institutions that make up Colorado's economy. Some of those ecosystems are Boulder's TechStars, which runs programs all over the world, including Japan, for which one of Denver South's unicorns is partnered with. And other examples include Innisphere and Boomtown. This ecosystem helps catalyze a number of growth companies, privately held startup companies valued at over $1 billion, known as unicorns, which we're seeing an increase in Colorado. Some of those are located at the bottom in our logos. You've got Ibotta recognized there, EverCommerce, Guild Education, Quantum Metric, and Boom Supersonic will be highlighted on another screen, which is part of the Denver South ecosystem as well. The consistent growth of our ecosystem has attracted significant early stage capital from both venture capital and private equity from both coasts. And from 2010 to 2019 alone, 1,932 startups in Colorado received $16.3 billion in VC funding. An investment increase from 883 million assets under management in 2010 to 2007 billion in 2017, which represents an increase of 205%, which is pretty significant for a non-coastal market such as Colorado. Further, a recent study by Access Venture Partners in collaboration with my office found that Colorado is no longer just an early stage ecosystem. We rank 6th in the nation for total VC deals. Since 2016, the average Colorado Series A size has doubled from 5.9 million to 10.5 million. Since 2016, the average Colorado Series B has also doubled from 12.5 million to 25.6 million. And Colorado-based early stage investors grew by 50% in the past 5 years. Since 2015, the ecosystem has evolved from primarily comprising of business-to-business software, energy, telecom business, to more advanced industries such as aerospace, defense, biotech, drug discovery, robotics, and advanced manufacturing. Next slide. Some of the case studies of some exciting Colorado startups are highlighted here. Altus Space Machines, Microtechnology, Solid Power, and Boom Supersonic. Altus Space Machines is in the robotics space. We've got Metabolic Structure, a creative food additives company, Solid Power, which is solid state battery storage company working with some of the top automotive companies in the world. And then Denver South's own Boom Supersonic startup that recently became one of Colorado's unicorns, which we're really proud of, and is a result of a serial entrepreneur as well. So great to have that talent in the ecosystem. Next slide. And then here's just a representation of what the industries look like and what their growth rates over time look like from 2010 to 2019. As you can see, some of Colorado's strategic industries grew faster than the national average by at least 4 percentage points. You'll see each of the sectors represented here, and the developments in our strategic and high-tech industries is actually outpacing most of our other strategic industries as well. The most dramatic difference you'll see on this chart is the difference between growth rates that occurred in the aerospace and bioscience sectors, with differences of 25 and 18% percentage points respectively. And we now hold significant densities in most of the industries shown, along with electronics, which we saw stronger relative growth in that sector as well, which indicates that Colorado really does have a strong value chain and supply chain to fuel adjacent industries and continue to represent the knowledge-based economy that we have been over time. Next slide. This slide will just show you kind of a density of the important sectors and verticals, as well as logos of some of the well-established or more multinational companies that you may have heard of, the Fortune 500s, high growth, more scale up technology companies. We'll highlight a few of the companies you'll see on the map that the density really is concentrated along the Front Range. About 86% of the state's economic activity does happen along the Front Range within the 9-county region, from kind of Fort Collins to Colorado Springs. We're trying to make sure that our startup ecosystems are and densities of our technology sectors are more represented throughout the state. And that is something that the state has paid a lot of attention to, and is trying to get this density, not just along the Front Range, but in other communities around the state. Next slide. Those networks for the startups that create these densities are contributed to, a number of different dynamics, but some of those include networking events and Denver Startup Week, which is said to be one of the largest startup weeks in the country. Some of those collaborative workspaces and business models shift over time, and it's great to see that Colorado is always well represented as these new business models for workspaces such as WeWork and the industries and those type of business models pop up. And then the networking groups that exist here, number of meetup groups, the number of alumni associations, and number of industry partnerships and specific industry vertical groups that exist here with our business associations, as well as networking events like 1 Million Cups, Women Who Code, Startup Women, Rockies Venture Club, and other investor forums are really part of the reason why the Denver metro area has such a connected and engaged network and such a successful network for startups, because they're able to collaborate with entrepreneurs, build connections, access mentor networks, leaders, investors, and other talent in other areas. Next slide. That ecosystem and collaborative network is also fueled by our research institutions. Colorado has a significant network of networks that go beyond just those traditional venture capital accelerators and incubators, all the way up to our federally funded laboratories and universities. We have a thriving ecosystem with over 33 federally funded research laboratories, such as the National Renewable Energy Lab and the NOAA Earth Systems Lab. We have 6 R1 and R2 research universities pushing academic discovery, including CU Boulder, Colorado School of Mines. We have 1 of 6 U.S. patent and trade offices in the nation. And through these collaborative institutes, Colorado received $4.9 billion in federal research and development funding in 2018, which is represents the 8th in the US. So that's a pretty good amount of funding coming into a smaller state like ours. 229 Small Business Innovation Research and Development Awards in 2019, which makes us the 4th in the US for accessing those SBIR grants, which speaks to our innovation and research economy. And then 641 patents per million residents in 2020, which ranks Colorado 10th in the state, or 10th in the US. My apologies. Next slide. And Colorado is fueled by our talent ecosystem, our knowledge-based economy. We move more people in and out of the state than we do goods, and we also have a really strong in-migration. 54% of Coloradans aren't from Colorado, and a lot of that growth you'll see here on this slide. We had 50,000 annual net migrants to Colorado from 2010 to 2019, which represents the 3rd largest population growth in the US at 14%, and forecasted to have 8 million people in Colorado by 2050. The larger the bubble on this map represents a larger density of people moving in from those markets to Colorado. So you'll see strong coastal in-migration, and mostly those in-migrants are also the markets that we compete with the most for projects when projects are looking to relocate as well. Next slide. And that in-migration is represented here from both locally grown talent as well as that in-migration of talent. We have a really highly skilled and educated workforce here in Colorado. Our workforce shows this strength. We confer advanced STEM degrees at a higher rate than the US. At the last tally, we were at 27% compared to the US, which was at 23%. And in 2019, we conferred about 58,000 STEM degrees. We see about 50,000 immigrants per year, as you saw on the previous slide, from around the US and around the world. And primarily those individuals are coming to Colorado to work with an advanced degree. 43% of adults in Colorado hold at least a bachelor's degree, which makes us the second most highly educated workforce in the country behind Massachusetts. And we're only one of 3 states with an education rate that's greater than 40%. Next slide. That connectivity is important to moving those people in and out and to access different markets. For that commerce to exist, we need great, global connections, and Denver International Airport is one of the largest by land area and the second largest airport in the world, 5th busiest. You can get to any major city in 4 hours, which is pretty unique. And we service 26 international destinations in 12 countries, and that continues to grow. And we do have the ability to continue to expand that airport as well, which most dense urban tier 1 cities do not have the ability to do. They're pretty landlocked. So Colorado is in a unique position to continue to access these international routes and domestic routes respectively. And you'll see some of the flight times highlighted on this chart. And we also do have fare breakdowns for international and domestic flights, and noted that Colorado has some pretty competitive flight fares when compared to other markets that we compete with. Denver has the largest airport in the US by footprint, which we think it will continue to grow and continue to allow us to access additional markets here in the near future, pending the outcome of COVID. And then our central location in terms of time zone allows same-day communication with Europe and Asia, which helps us to also attract some of these international and multinational companies here to Colorado. And they require access to market through these flight connectivity as well. Next slide. And one of the ways we support, oftentimes states, and including my division that runs programs that are primarily geared toward larger scale up multinational companies. We do run an access to capital program for the advanced industry sector, which is the knowledge-based economy, called the Colorado Advanced Industries Accelerator program. It has about a $30 million balance in it this year, and it has kind of 3 separate funding mechanisms for that startup ecosystem. One is proof of concept, which is a direct grant to the university systems that have research divisions and that are working on commercializing products. So those are direct grants to the universities from 2014 to 2020. We've granted $86.5 million. That represents 503 projects. And then we have an early stage capital and retention grant, which goes directly to companies to shop for capital. It requires 2-to-1 match. The company has to put in $2 for every dollar we put in. It's a highly competitive program, and it helps early stage companies in Colorado stay in Colorado and grow, create jobs, and commercialize products faster. We've created over 2,047 jobs in that program and retained over 2,100 jobs. And this program has also received national attention from the Brookings Institute as one of the most unique ways states can provide access to capital programs to companies. And then we have a collaborative infrastructure program, which has leveraged, collectively, all of these programs have leveraged $1.7 billion in third-party capital. But the collaborative infrastructure grant is really unique in terms of bringing together multiple industries that cross different verticals, as well as university partners and federal funding combined with state funding. I think one of the most unique examples we have of that would be the ADAPT Center at the Colorado School of Mines is a grantee of our collaborative infrastructure grant. That was an additive manufacturing facility that was built in partnership with Lockheed Martin, Ball Corporation, Colorado School of Mines, Faustin Tool, which is a small women-owned business in Colorado, and the Manufacturing Extension Partnership that represents Colorado's federally funded manufacturing network, and then OEDIT all came in and funded a 3D laser printer and a technology that allows for unique alloy characterization so that they could 3D print parts for the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter on this laser printer. So pretty unique infrastructure project that benefited the entire aerospace and additive manufacturing community collectively. And I'll stop there and allow for questions. And I thank everyone for tuning in.
Great, thank you, Michelle. That's a wealth of information there. We appreciate you joining us and sharing all that with us. I'm going to allow some questions. If folks in the audience have questions, please chime in through the chat. We got somebody watching the chat, and we'll get those out to us. But I wanted to start, Michelle, real quickly with a concept. With the Advanced Industries Grant, could you speak real briefly to that at a high level? What is that for entrepreneurs who are on the line here? What is that? What's the magnitude of funding? And what are you seeing as far as how would you suggest businesses prepare to apply for that to get better odds of achieving that funding?
Sure. So there's a lot of layers to that question, but it is a highly competitive program where each industry sector that is in the advanced economy, so that would be aerospace, bioscience, infrastructure engineering, electronics, advanced manufacturing, energy and natural resources, those knowledge-based industries, they each have the opportunity to have companies within their industry verticals apply for a grant program. Typical grant size is about $250,000 to $350,000 for that early stage investment, size, and then the caps come off if the companies cross industries and collaborate with different university systems. So it's highly dependent on what they're trying to accomplish and how much grant funding they're trying to access. It does require matching funds. Those can be federal or private dollars coming in. In order to prepare for the application, the company really does have to demonstrate that they do have a unique opportunity to commercialize a product or idea that's well patented and not a solution that's currently provided in the market. So they really do have to demonstrate that they are solving a market problem with well protected IP and licenses and so on and so forth. And each other industry has the opportunity to vote on the pitches from other industries. So it's not like an information and technology sector is only being voted on by the information and technology sector. The aerospace entrepreneurs will vote on the information technology and so on and so forth, which we think creates a playing field that's more representative of the technology commercialization and less of a vested interest in just representing one ecosystem. To prepare for that, because it is very competitive, we do recommend that people go through the boot camps that like the Rocky Ventures Club and those partners do offer pitch day trainings. And we do request and require that these companies go through some of those training opportunities before they apply. I'm happy to send the application kind of criteria for each of those grants. They vary by early stage capital and collaborative infrastructure. And then the proof of concept is just a direct grant to the university. So the company would have to be working on a research project with a research institution to access that pool of funds.
Great. Well, thank you for that. Was a complicated question. Thank you for that great answer. We will share some of that materials. And I know that in my experience in working with companies out there, working with a RIoT or an InnoSphere RBC is really beneficial to the companies because it is a rigorous process and they help prepare the entrepreneur and the company for that process. So speaking from experience, I know those are great tools and certainly ones that the entrepreneurs should avail themselves of. We do have a question in the chat. What are some of the challenges and opportunities you foresee as the ecosystem continues to expand?
I think mostly the challenges, at least what we hear, is that Colorado doesn't have, even though we do have a significant amount of funding coming into the state of Colorado, we don't have like a Sand Hill Road. You can't just shop for capital in the same way you could in Silicon Valley. So some companies are saying that the density of access to capital funding Colorado companies doesn't necessarily exist at the level that they would typically see in a coastal market, but we are seeing that increase. So I think there's opportunity for more access to capital and changing up that capital stack somewhat to provide different layers of capital at different points in time. Right now, we're really good at the angel side, and maybe some of the other funds could be augmented in some other areas. I think the other challenges are that the cost of living in Colorado is kind of getting a little bit outpacing where I think we are at in terms of the economy for this ecosystem. Our cost of housing and lack of housing availability is an issue. So I think that that's going to be a challenge for us to continue to grow, is if we don't have housing and childcare and all of those other great things, then people aren't going to be able to be here. So I think those are some challenges. And then, like I mentioned in the slide, a lot of the density is located in the urban core. And I think that leaves some great opportunity for innovation and entrepreneurship for the rural communities kind of left out of the ecosystem because it's concentrated in the Denver metro area.
Yeah, Tom, did you want to chime in on that question? I don't want to hit you in here as well. I think you got some things to add.
Unmute first, but so I'll offer just one perspective on the capital challenge that was stated, and in our observation, kind of working on a national basis, what is most strategic is that early capital, that pre-seed, C stage, maybe even Series A. Once a company kind of has some traction and is onto those following funding rounds, the Series B, C, D, that kind of money tends to be geography agnostic. It's looking for really good investments to make, and in that sense, if there's a concern in Colorado about lack of like the really big capital, that can solve itself with great companies. And so having that earlier stage support to grow and seed something and get it started kind of in the region, that's the capital. And it's great to hear, already there's strong angel capital as an example in the region and stuff. So for entrepreneurs that are listening in, I think you're in a great place already, and it will only get better as there's more and more exits from the region.
Agreed. I think that's a great point. And I also think that, like Michelle, maybe your comment, but I think COVID has really taught us that you can do more of this via Zoom and connectivity without being in person. So I think some of that geographic proximity from Sand Hill and Silicon Valley, or out in Boston, the Research Triangle, where Tom's at there, is really lessened a little bit. So I think with the COVID and the move towards the Zoom economy, if you will, I think that's helped that. Are you seeing evidence of that at all?
We're not necessarily seeing it. We haven't seen the slowdown in our economy at all. But again, we're mostly, and this is just based on the way our programming works here in Colorado, we don't have a lot of early stage capital. So as Tom mentioned, we don't have that capital that people are looking for. And that's primarily because it's riskier capital, and the state isn't going to expose taxpayer money to that risky capital. So even bioscience and so on and so forth, which Colorado has great strength in, would behoove us to invest early stage capital, but that's got a longer tail. It's a risky investment and it takes longer to recoup. And so the state really is in a position to have a lot of programming around those areas because we are taxpayer funded. That said, we do have programming that does support the large multinational companies through job growth incentive tax credit and strategic fund. And so we're seeing really strong deal flow from large, fast growing companies come to Colorado. So we've seen a lot of projects in that area. We're not seeing a lot of smaller, more innovative, entrepreneur-oriented companies seek capital necessarily, other than through our advanced industry program, which is also still doing well. But again, I wouldn't necessarily have exposure to those companies because the way our programming works.
Great. And just picking up on Tom's point there, I think there's a concern in the startup community that most of our early stage investment, especially the later, the B and C, A, B, and C rounds, are still coming from out-of-state firms. Those investor exits, they may end up with the company moving out of Colorado or potentially not bringing that money back to Colorado. I do think as we get more exits in the area, we'll have more entrepreneurs and more serial entrepreneurs coming out of this, similar to Silicon Valley. But does OEDIT have any plans or any strategies to help address that? How we retain those investors and those entrepreneurs here in the state once they have an exit with some of these burgeoning companies, the booms and the others, as you mentioned, the unicorns, as they exit, how do we keep them here? Do you have any thoughts on that?
A couple of thoughts. Well, we have, we do have the Venture Capital Authority and some other mechanisms for this follow-on capital or so on and so forth. But for the unicorns, like the Ibotta's, the Guilds, the Booms, I think that they're attracted to staying here based on the ecosystem. So the dynamism of the market, lifestyle reasons, their employees. We find that a lot of these companies have cited that employee retention is much higher in Colorado because people want to live here and stay here. And the fact that there are talented other knowledge-based industries that they can partner with and all of these research institutions is also very attractive. But we don't have a dedicated strategy to keeping them here other than making sure that our political environment, our recreational and lifestyle-oriented environment, and then things like housing, schools, and the other contributing factors to why any company would either stay or leave are present. I think that our business costs overall remain really competitive, but some of those other costs, like cost of living, are, making it more difficult for companies to make decisions to stay.
Yep.
I'm sorry, if I can just add on to that. One of the observations that we've had, here in the Triangle, where, 15, 20 years ago, you would have said it was at startup, 1.0 that didn't have the exits, didn't have the mentors, so on. And now we have that. A lot of it is about just quality of life and, living in a place you want to live. And that's not just, the outdoors and the different activities and things available there, but it's about diversity of industry, which creates diversity of thought and the ability to interact across, different circles of people and so on. And so I think Colorado is extremely well positioned as a state that, has strong aerospace and has strong, industry sectors, but isn't, dominated completely by one industry, like, energy sector in Texas, for example, or something. And so that's really healthy in the ecosystem. And I think that's actually a strategic part to retaining that talent, is for them to be able to exist in kind of a diverse culture that also has lots of quality of life elements.
I think that's a great point, Tom. It's interesting. We also work to recruit, as Michelle knows, we work to recruit companies here. And one of the companies we have been talking to and working with who relocated here recently, one of their comments was the strengths of that diversity and the strength of he referred to it as the purple political nature of Colorado. They saw that as a real strength. They didn't really want the extremes of I'll just pick on states because I can, California or Texas. So they really found that the talent they wanted, as well as the culture they're looking for in Colorado. And I think that speaks to it very well. Michelle, you mentioned the universities and the importance of them. What do you think the colleges can do better to support this ecosystem? Is there anything you're seeing and talking with them that they could improve on, or you'd ask that they do?
So we're actually working on that much more deliberately and intentionally. We have heard from companies that they've had better strategic partnerships with, for example, University of Texas or so on, like Dell, University of Texas. They have larger corporate partnerships represented. I will say that I think that a lot of that has to do with marketing. Colorado is not a boastful state, so we don't talk a lot about what we do. And I think we need to do more of that. Universities particularly, I don't know that maybe anyone on this call would know, but we just produced a quantum film, And Colorado really is the quantum epicenter for quantum communication and quantum sensing. And that is an enabling technology that really will change many of these industry verticals in pretty profound ways. And I don't know that anyone even knows that we've got the top physicist in quantum right here in Boulder, working, Dr. Jun Yi, and all of these other great industry partners that would say that Colorado really is the quantum center of the world. We even heard that when we were in the UK from UK-based companies that knew more about our quantum ecosystem than probably people who live in Colorado. So I think that there are a lot of these technology partnerships and relationships that could work more closely with the corporates and the startup community. And they're fearful of doing so with the universities because they're not as nimble and they don't react as quickly programmatically or talent production wise. So we're working on that with the universities right now by having industry roundtable meetings with the universities where they will pull together 10 companies in each industry vertical and have a conversation with higher education and the community college system to talk about what some of those synergies could look like. What are they looking for that they're not getting? And how can we better connect those relationships between the business community and the university system?
Thanks. And Tom, I know you're out in the Research Triangle with some great universities out there. Do you see things being done out there that our schools could do better here?
I think one of the biggest changes of the kind of strategy that's happened over the last decade in the university systems here, and in particular, NC State University being one of the lead tier 1 technical universities here in the area, was a shift from looking at all of the research and discovery that happens and gets patented from universities, and any tier 1 research university, intellectual property is a big piece of their strategy. Historically, universities were very focused on how can we maximize the ROI on licensing deals. And here in North Carolina, that was the case for many years. And what ended up happening was that many times it's alumni, it's graduate students or faculty that are trying to spin companies out, and then they're suddenly having to get into a protracted negotiation with their own university over their ability to start something new. And here in North Carolina, universities are largely starting to understand that there's a much higher ROI on making it really frictionless to get that IP out into a startup to support and foster that and to help grow great industry that creates jobs and feeds kind of the talent pipeline coming from university. It's very mission aligned with the university. And frankly, when those companies get big and strong, financially, they contribute back to the universities more than would have come out of a tightly negotiated licensing deal anyway. And so that mindset of, allowing the discovery to create jobs and economic impact versus just the P&L of the tech transfer office is something that I think has been transformational.
Yeah, no, I do think that whole concept of improving and de-frictionizing the tech transfer is a big issue for the universities. Michelle, is somebody chiming in there? Guess not. Michelle, just is picking back up on I got 2 questions for picking it back up on the advanced industry grants. Can you just give us a few examples for the entrepreneurs on the phone of some creative illustrations you've seen or creative applications you've seen that you funded over the last year or 2 in that program?
There's a lot of really unique, awesome companies that have gone through the Advanced Industry Accelerator program. One of the earlier funded companies, which I thought was quite unique, you may have heard of them or not, is called Active Armor. And they're a medical company, medical device that builds kind of plastic cast systems so that people can recreate with their cast on versus the traditional casting model. You can't get wet. This has a breathable antimicrobial sort of a cast system, which I thought was pretty interesting and quite unique. And then there's companies like Solid Power, Solid State Battery, which have gotten huge contracts with like Hyundai and BMW and Amazons of the world, then really kind of expanded their network globally based on, a pretty minimal amount of capital that we were able to provide to them. So, I think we could give you a ton of great examples, but I think what we've seen mostly is some of the advancements that have happened, again, like you talked about, the trying to get technology out of the universities and trying to get some of those principal investigators at universities not to continue research for research's sake, but to actually want commercial products to come out of the university system. And so we are seeing really collaborative relationships between these companies and the universities, and new programming come out of universities where they might have a shadow office that's not necessarily technology transfer, meaning it doesn't have the same rules that a traditional technology transfer office would have, but it's co-located as just a business accelerator that's operated as sort of a P3 model, which allows access that the university structure doesn't. And we've also done that with NRail recently. We're working on an energy park called Glow Energy Park in Jefferson County, which would be a state-owned energy park that sits on the campus of NRail, but outside the Department of Energy fence, so that the companies, accelerators like Wells Fargo, the Shell accelerators of the world, can operate in an environment that's not subject to the Department of Energy's rules and requirements. So we're starting to try and break down some of those barriers and have access to programming around the state, but provide more of a kind of facilitatory role in that versus a directional program creation, if you will.
Great, thanks. Tom, do you have other questions for Michelle? I've got a couple more, but I want to apologize. I'm kind of running on here. I'll make sure you've got a chance to get any out there you have.
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that we believe is, is fundamental is developing kind of long-term collaborations. And so I'd love your thoughts on, or examples of how maybe a grant program or something initiated a relationship that then developed into kind of a longer term collaboration, or drawing of additional maybe industry partners or other partners into programs, and ways that people that are listening and maybe could think about, like, how do I leverage the relationship side of working with the state of Colorado?
Yeah, so I think that there are a lot of interconnected relationships. Like I said, for example, we have the Advanced Industry Program, we've got the Venture Capital Authority, the Advanced Industries Program, which I should have mentioned, also does have an angel investor tax credit, which we do give angel investors tax credits for investing in the advanced industries, which is fantastic. And so that ecosystem becomes really small when the funders, the business owners and entrepreneurs, the researchers and scientists, and all of these people are part of these networks, meaning some of them are reviewing applications for the Advanced Industries program, because we do have a volunteer network of over 180 reviewers reviewing these applications. And these are industry experts volunteering their time. They've started companies, they've exited companies, multi-million-dollar companies, and now they're donating their time back to help support companies. So we've seen relationships develop by us providing capital to a company that then turns into a very large, well-capitalized company that has scaled to a state where then they're now able to donate their time back to the community as a grant reviewer or something as a participant in our Advanced Industries program. And then we also just are seeing more connectivity where I will have recruited a company CEO and or been a part of a business network, and that person will send an email and say, my buddy's a CEO in this company, would one of your entrepreneurs be willing to talk to him about his or her experience in relocating or working in Colorado? And then we connect them and then they chat. And it just sort of is one of those environments where the access to power and speed of collaboration happens at a more rapid rate than you would in some of those other cutthroat environments. And I think part of that is contributed to what we said earlier, is that 54% of people who live in Colorado aren't from Colorado, and that diversity of thought and all those ideas that come from the places they came from end up here. And so they share those with others, and they're really invested in the community because they like living here. And I think that is kind of a self-fulfilling organic process. And all the state can do is kind of step back and not get in the way. I think the more rules we create, the less impact we have.
That's great. And that is a great advantage, by the way, over places like Silicon Valley that are much more competitive and cutthroat. And that sense of collaboration and introducing folks to each other is a real strength. So So that's glad. I'm glad to hear as well that you said, the pandemic, I'm glad to hear as well that you said, the pandemic really hasn't slowed Colorado down. Economy's growing, folks are doing well. What has you the most excited as you're just like looking forward over the next 6 or 12 months? Is there anything on the horizon you can speak to that you're excited about?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of unique opportunities overall. I mean, I'm sort of a little bit of a nerd, so I'm most excited about the opportunity for the acceleration of our quantum ecosystem as well as semiconductors. I think the CHIPS Act at the federal level and recognizing that Colorado's competitive position in semiconductors really doesn't exist and should, and the drought in Taiwan and some supply chain issues have really given the US a real big opportunity to strengthen some of our key technologies and provide more access to capital for innovation within those sectors. So making chips smaller so that they work better and faster and they're cheaper. And so I think the pandemic has caused kind of that reinvigoration of innovation and entrepreneurship to solve problems that have already existed and already been solved, but just do it better instead of creating a new idea altogether, to focus on doing things better. So that has me excited. And then I think there's a real opportunity based on foreign policy to get more foreign direct investment in Colorado. Companies abroad want to have a US presence. And I think there's a real opportunity, and especially in the startup community from these other states where they need access to the US market. Colorado offers a unique value proposition, because it's a really great place to live and it's not as polarizing as some other markets, meaning it wouldn't be as big of a cultural shock for many companies that have been operating in other countries to come to Colorado as it would be, if, for example, moving to a southern state or even an East Coast state that's more northern. I think Colorado represents a great opportunity for that as well. So I'm just excited to see what new business models pop up based on having to do things better and more efficiently.
Wonderful. I guess may I have just one more question if I have time for that, Tom?
Sure.
Which is that you had mentioned earlier, is kind of the Zoom culture changing things or not and stuff. And one of the opportunities that we're seeing and trying to lean into here is that there are a lot of folks who took the opportunity during the pandemic to move into some smaller communities and to not live in the urban areas. And as you think about how to diversify and encourage entrepreneurship kind of outside of just that front range corridor that you talked about, really the only barrier to working from anywhere today is high quality broadband. And I'm interested, this may be outside of OEDIT's domain, but kind of is there an overall strategy on how to assure good connectivity in some of these other areas that we know have great entrepreneurs, but might not have all the tools to take advantage of that?
Sure. It is a little bit outside of our domain, the Office of Information Technology, and there is a broadband kind of committee that works out of that. I will say that, interestingly enough, there were some dynamics that shifted during the pandemic. The rural communities actually outpaced the urban core because of tourism. People were driving and they had really boom years for their hoteling and recreation and lodging, and the downtown centers were vacated completely, and the urban core, the retail. So it was sort of an interesting flip where rural communities did really well and outperformed. And then you had all these people moving into the rural communities, and then rural communities saying, we don't want all of these people moving in, you're raising our housing costs. So it was sort of one of those catch-22s where they want diversification, people want diversification and density in different industries, but then when it happens, it's sort of like, well, we weren't ready for that. And so there's a balance between making sure that the infrastructure happens in a way that happens before the boom hits. And so we're working on some of those dynamics and are realizing that people can choose to live where they want, but there are unintended consequences to some of the things that we think we're doing well. Like we created a loan program, which was a remote worker program, where if a company located in a dense urban environment, but then hired employees that were able to work remotely in these rural communities, we would pay an extra bonus on those employees that were working remotely. And that kind of backfired on us because of people moving into these communities that some of these communities didn't want more people in. So we're iterating, we're learning as we go. But no, that was a long way of saying we don't know yet. We're still trying to figure it out.
Cool, thank you.
Very startup to iterate. That's perfect. One last question, Michelle. With we got RIoT on the phone here, and I know you've mentioned Sphere and RVC. How does the state work with organizations like this that help to foster the entrepreneurs and coach the entrepreneurs and the companies up? How do you work with those organizations, or how might they work better with you?
Sure. So different ways. So some of those organizations, many of them, if not most of them, or all of them, have been funded by our Advanced Industry Program for programmatic things, as well as supporting their industry awards or companies that they're working with. So through funding, we are also participants actively. So we do FAM tours. We were just, our team, OEDIT, was at Sphere 3 or 4 weeks ago, learning about their new programming and new things that they have going on. We're also jointly working with all of the organizations like Catalyst Campus in Colorado Springs, Sphere in Northern Colorado, and a number of other endeavors like that to work on their Build Back Better applications to the EDA. So we help them identify ways to access funding and make sure that their grant application is strong and endorsed by the governor and our office. So we work with them on those type of initiatives. And we also work on things like if they have companies within their organization saying, we're having problems getting H-1B visas for, strategic employers or something, we'll help them navigate some of those issues that some of their companies might be having that are barriers for continuing certain research and development oriented activities. So I think we just act as more of a facilitator, connector, and directional participant. And then with RVC, they participate in our venture capital authority. They also, again, participate in our Advanced Industries Program and are very involved in reviewing funding, boot camps. And we also use places like Telluride in Gunnison. We've partnered with their ICE lab on an outdoor recreation kind of innovation challenge with Moose Jaw as a partner. Walmart owns Moose Jaw, one of the largest online retailers. But that's one of the examples of a way we've partnered with an accelerator in a rural community. So we just facilitate, connect, work with companies that are operating out of those environments, also fund them, and then invite them to participate in our activities and then support their activities as well.
Great, thanks, Michelle. Tom, do you want to wrap us up here?
Yeah, thanks again, Michelle, for everything that you shared. I loved how data-driven the presentation was as well. It's really great to see folks that are building a strategy and then executing on that strategy based on facts and data in the data economy. As we have more and more sensors and devices and connectivity and analytics, you're on your way in that regard. So that's fantastic. Thanks to Denver South. Thanks for everyone participating. Project Nexus, if you've not been involved before, absolutely find ways to get involved. I'll ask you in a moment, Tom, to promote again the event that you've got coming up next week. But we have 2 more events in this series of talks. You see them on the screen. The next one being November 16th, where we'll talk about how entrepreneurial and small organizations can really leverage and partner with big industry. We've got some great guests coming into that. And then save the date for December 14th, where we intend to have a conversation that is about economic support organizations that have specific tie-ins to capital, a little bit like the OEDIT conversation that we've had here today, but bringing in other voices from Angel and VC and other communities. So we hope you'll join us for each of those sessions. Registration pages will be going up soon. And in the meantime, thanks again to the local partners. Arapahoe Libraries, I think, is on the line right now in Denver South. If you want to check out a really cool space that's supporting entrepreneurs, definitely check them out. But I'll pass it back to you, Tom, for any closing remarks.
That's fine. I just want to thank everyone for joining us, and thank you, Michelle and Tom. I'll be respectful of your time. I know you get tight schedules, so thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing your information. Again, this is a reminder, we do have that October 27th Nexus Forum coming up at the Venture X, where you can hear from Lee Fatzinger of Turbine Labs and his entrepreneur journey. We'd love to have you join us for that. And with that, please don't hesitate to reach out. Again, all of our partners on the phone I won't go through, but do appreciate everybody in here joining us and all the partners we have here. So focus back on Michelle's comment of, I think a big thing for us to do here is to bring people together, connect, and collaborate. So that's kind of the underlying pinnings of Project Nexus. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we'll do anything we can to get you connected and collaborating with others. Thanks, folks. Michelle and Tom, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a great day.